What is going on, Replo fam? It is Sanjay Jenkins coming at you with a very special episode. I've got Mr. Larry Kim here, founder and CEO of Customers.ai. Thank you so much, Larry, for being here. I'm really excited to jam here. How
Awesome.
are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Sanjay. Great to be here.
Yeah, of course. So before we get started, I want to kind of mention something which I rarely get to do on this podcast, but I've had the pleasure of being one of Larry's customers in the past. I'm not currently one of his customers, but one of the brands that I was consulting for last year, brand that was on Shark Tank even, we actually used his product. And I will say, like, I don't get paid to say this, but like it was a very, very kind of impactful, like, transformative thing for us. We'll get to all of that in a bit. But before we get started, I want to talk to you, Larry, I want to ask you a little bit about kind of what Customers.ai does now, and then we'll get into a little bit of how you got here. But let's start with this. What is your business? What do you guys actually do?
Sure. We are a visitor identification and remarketing technology company. So we provide data on who is visiting your website, and it doesn't require any special forms or anything. Like we can just tell you Sanjay's on your website or Larry's on your website for a meaningful fraction of your website visitors, and that data is typically used by marketers and sales professionals to either power like automated email outreach, or typically it can also be used to power like ad campaigns, so remarketing campaigns where we send that data to like an ad platform like Meta or Google, and that's pretty interesting because that data isn't available in those ad platforms otherwise because of how the tracking scripts have been kind of neutered by browser changes and cookie policy changes. So that's what we do. We work with around 1,000 e-commerce brands, and not exclusively to e-commerce. Like we also have B2C and other types of companies, and we've been doing this for a couple of years now.
That's awesome. I will tell you again, just going back to my own personal anecdote of using your tool. We added the Customers AI app and like all the little snippets, I think the morning of. So like there wasn't a ton of time, like the morning of airing on Shark Tank, it was November 1st. And there wasn't a ton of time for us to like actually like pick up a lot of things. And the episode aired at 7 p.m. Central Time. I think we went and looked back at the data. We added like probably over $12,000 of incremental revenue because we were identifying visitors. That was actually being pushed into our Klaviyo like welcome series. When this is people who didn't actually sign up directly on the website, we were able to capture these people. They came to the website because of Shark Tank. We were able to put them in our email flows, added an incremental $12,000 that day, which is massive. That was like truly transformative. And I've been interested in like identity resolution, visitor identification for a while. It's something I've brought up to the Replo team, and they're like, no, we're not going to touch this. So I'm excited that we're partners. But it was really astonishing to see your tool like do the work, especially so quickly. Like it was like, I mean, obviously we got a huge spike in traffic that day, but that was a very meaningful moment in time for us to see it work. So super bullish on this. Before we get into like a lot of the depth, because I know we're going to cover a couple of different things for those of you watching at home. We're going to talk about kind of get a little bit deeper on how this tool actually works. We're going to talk about some of the competitors and the level of accuracy in the underlying data, and a lot of in compliance and all these sorts of things. Very similar, some of the common questions that people have about this. Before we do that, Larry, I want to talk to you about your own career in digital marketing. You've been like the search godfather essentially for a long time. So can you like walk us to the start? Like how did you get into this space? Why? You're an electrical engineer like by training. Like how did you get into digital marketing?
It was I started a company called WordStream in my 20s. It was initially search advertising consulting work, and developed some software tools to automate super repetitive tasks. And then kind of the light bulb went off, and I thought like, well, maybe I could just sell the software that does the stupid repetitive tasks. That became WordStream and raised about 18 million over a decade, and uh, the company grew to about 300 people, over 10,000 customers globally, and managing over $1 billion of ad spend for those customers. It was acquired for close to 200 million in 2018. I owned a lot of that, so that was pretty awesome. And the company was about 55 million revenue at the time, 60 million EBITDA. So since then, I think the founder insight from having built that business over a decade was online advertising is extremely competitive and very difficult to turn a profit. Like that, we had that many customers, and that very few of them were, printing money towards the end. Especially like it started out as being like windfall profits and all this stuff, but like it just became more competitive every year, with CPCs going up like double digits every quarter for a decade. And the observation was just like, gosh, there should be a better like a GTM strategy here. That got me interested in remarketing solutions and data. And that's kind of how we ended up here. It was kind of based on this observation that the few campaigns that were profitable reliably in my customers' campaigns were the remarketing campaigns. And so, identity resolution is definitely in the category of remarketing, because it's not like driving new traffic to your site. It's kind of identifying and remarketing to either through email or through ads or postcards or whatever to the folks who've already sort of express intent and interest in the products and services that you're selling. And so, that's kind of the genesis of that. How we're here.
One of my favorite parts about your response just now is how nonchalant you were about selling a company for close to $200 million. And one of the things that has been kind of rattling in my brain since I started doing research was, why, after selling a company for that amount of money and owning a lot of it at the time, like what compelled you to jump back in and actually like be a founder again? Like you could be feet up, chilling, like not doing anything, and not doing anything like of like really heavy lifting. Like, and this, building a business like this is pretty hard, or it seems to be hard. What compelled you to like get back in the ring?
Look, the people who do this kind of stuff, I think they're wired a certain way, and like this, retiring at a young age doesn't necessarily align with the types of values that you would have to have in order to have such an outcome. And that was certainly true for me. And it was just kind of the realization that as spectacular as that outcome was, so like raising 18 million, selling for close to 200 million, like that's almost as good as like Klaviyo or something like that, where they raised like 750 million and they went public for 7.5 billion or something like that. So that's like what is it, like a 10x, right? So it's like 10x return on capital. Like that's pretty impressive. I think if there's one bummer there, it's like the multiple wasn't that high. So like my revenue at exit was about 55 million. EBITDA was around 16 million. So like it was like 15, 16 times earnings is what we ended up, or closer to 3 times revenue, 4 times revenue. And you get in your head like, if I had played my cards a little differently, like could I have gotten like a 5x or 10x or 20x strategic valuation? And so there's definitely an interest in kind of taking the learnings. Like they're very unique learnings for building and scaling a multi-$100 million business. So I just got it in my head that like, gosh, like if this was a pretty unbelievable outcome, but like if I had just done a couple things a little differently, it could have been like a a unicorn kind of outcome. And so I guess that's one kind of a checklist that I have, is to try to generate a more strategic kind of multiple, like a 10x or a 20x on exit, if that makes
I
sense.
love it, and I think you're very right. Like this group of people, I've never touched an exit that close, but like I would like to think that I'm wired similarly, and I think there's some level of you can't shake it. I know a good friend of mine is Marshall Haas, who founded Shepherd, now called Somewhere. He sold, I think he had a $56 million exit or something, collected like 26 million at close. And this happened like last summer, and he said publicly, I'm retired, I'm good, I'm not doing anything. And then 2 days ago, he tweeted out, I'm actually starting another company. So lasted all of 6 months, and I think it's just there's work to be done, and I commend you for wanting to continue to work on it. I also really love that you took some of the learnings specifically from like, okay, where was there still alpha towards the end of WordStream, and now like that's become I think helped shape what customers is now. Kind of pivoting a little bit to what you're doing now, what you're working now, like um, there's so many different pieces that go into visitor identification, identity resolution, how you want to call it. What's actually involved? I'm assuming you're tapping into a lot of different pools of data. You have to figure out how to glue it all together, how to rank everything. What is like the true underlying math and science of this business?
Um, it's, I mean, we don't have enough time here, but basically, if I could describe it in a nutshell, there's like signals, um, like clues of who someone is. Like maybe someone opens an email, or somebody signs up for something, or like there's just clues of who people are. And there's ways to then try to figure out and remember who that person is, so that when you see them on a customer site, you can re-identify them as Sanjay or Larry. And it's very hard. Um, Actually, scratch that. It's very, very easy to do in a very stupid way, which appears to be the way that all of my competitors are doing it. It's very hard to do correctly, like where you have a very high degree of accuracy, and so that's one of the exciting things I would hope to talk about today.
Yeah, let's jump into that. So, I mean, the crux of this is, some anonymous visitor lands on a website. Um, all of these identity resolutions are trying to figure out who this person is, and then that some degree of there's a level of how many guesses that you're making, that each of these systems are making, and then how many of those guesses are actually correct. And what we were talking about right before we started recording was the discrepancy between you and your competitors is very large between number of guesses and as well as like accurate guesses. So please break that down for me, because it was very jarring. I didn't realize how big the gap was going to be.
Sure, sure. And the message I have today is that I I think that this visitor identification industry is kind of a fraud. That they have one job. These tools have one job, and that is to tell you who the heck is on your website. It's like, it's a pregnancy test. Like, what, it has one job. It's supposed to tell you if you're pregnant. Okay. Now, what we're finding, with the exception of Customers AI, of course, is that every one of these data sources and data vendors, like, I don't necessarily have to name all the names, but like all these companies that are in this space, when we test their data, these things are right maybe 5%, 10%, 20, 25% of the time, meaning they're wrong, 70, 80, 90, 95% of the time. There's a range, but it's like mostly wrong. So it's pretty shocking. Like they have one job to do. They're supposed to tell you like who's on your website, and they're just selling you like crappy shit data. Like the vast majority of the time. And this is problematic because like people are feeding this data into their marketing campaigns. So like if you're feeding it into like Klaviyo flows, if just say like as an example, say you're like 95% wrong emails going into a Klaviyo flow. Um, that's crazy because the spam complaints and the unsubscribes and it's just going to go through the roof. um, Google Postmaster Tools has like this, it's 0.3% threshold for spam complaints, above which, that's like three out of a thousand, right? 0.3%. Uh, but if 900 or 950 of 1,000 emails are the wrong emails, like you're like they're just literally it's like cold emailing. It's like random people, completely wrong, not even close. There's an extremely high probability that you'll exceed those spam thresholds and be classified as bulk sender. If you're using this kind of data to power ad campaigns, like this is like your you know audience plus targeting. Like you're creating a feed, a data feed from your website to inform the AI ad targeting platforms capabilities for Meta or Google or whatever, TikTok. It's like garbage in, garbage out. You're deliberately sabotaging your ad targeting capability by sending them like random grandmothers or like random people that have who never heard of you and have no intention of ever buying from you. So like it's just like you're doing so much harm when the data is like mostly wrong. Customers AI is on the other hand, it's the opposite. So their error rates are like 70, 80, 90 plus percent. Their error rate is our kind of accuracy rate. So we're correct most of the time as opposed to being wrong most of the time. Our accuracy rates could be like 65, 70, 80% is typical. It varies from site to site based on the consistency of the traffic, but there's a general pattern that emerges, and there are ways to accurately measure the accuracy of these third-party data providers for identity resolution, which I'm happy to talk more about today.
Well, let's definitely do that because I think anyone listening to this, I would imagine one of their early questions would be, well, how could you be so sure of the accuracy, and how can I be sure that you're not just like misrepresenting competitors, right? So like,
Yeah,
I'm actually yeah.
that's what these vendors do. They say like there's like video clips on the internet of these CEOs or marketers from these companies or website pages saying that they're 90% correct or 95% correct. I mean, that's crazy. Um, there is a way to tell. It's not necessarily intuitively obvious, but if you think about it, it becomes it's like one of these things that's obvious in hindsight. And so if you're subscribing to some visitor identification tool, you're going to have a dashboard. And it's going to have all these names showing up in the dashboard. And they're going to say, these are the people who visited your website. Okay. But how the heck are you supposed to know, like, did this person really, visit my website, or is it just error? Right. And there is a way, and it's to do a data test wherein you compare sort of the guesses provided by the different ID providers compared to sort of a golden record. A golden record would be like a customer purchase. So someone actually purchases something from your e-commerce store. So at that moment in time, this is a subset of your traffic. It's not all, you don't know who everyone is, but you do know who is on the other end of the browser at the time of a purchase, because there's a very, very high probability that the person who's making the purchase will provide their email address and that it'll be the correct email address. It's not 100%, but it's like very, very high. And you can then go back and say like, okay, well, it was Sanjay Jenkins who made the purchase. Who did Customers AI think it was? And who did, vendor XYZ think that it was, when he first arrived on the website? So that's the genesis of data test. You just monitor the golden records, like who the subset of traffic where you absolutely know who it is, and compare it to the guesses for those sessions, and then compute the difference. And so, from that you can extrapolate, like if you're, 10% right on the guesses for your golden records, like it implies, because you don't know, it's kind of random. It's like a sampling, right? Like this is a sample of your website traffic that where we knew who the identity was and compared it to the guesses, and that was 10%. We can infer that kind of accuracy would hold for the rest of the guesses, where we didn't know who the person was. And so when we run these tests on data providers and data product companies that provide website visitor identification, what we see is horrific. That's why I think this industry is a scam. It's well, except for Customers.ai, of course. That if it's 5% or 10% or 20%, like that's crazy. If it's like 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20, that's right. That's horrific. We're kind of in the opposite. It's like 70% correct. Like, keep in mind, nothing is 100%. Like, it's like if you ever use Apollo or whatever, like it's definitely not 100% correct. But like, you want it to be like an A or a B. It just can't be like a F minus. And there's like it's quite a Rubicon, like from going from 25% to like 70% accuracy. Like that is a massive difference, and that affects the campaign performance. So like there's kind of two key benefits here. One has to do with negative externalities. So like if you're trying to pump toxic waste into your Klaviyo flows and into your Google and Facebook ad campaigns, like it really fucks things up, like in a horrific way. Like it's like
in a very quick way, like you turbo nuke yourself.
Yeah, there's brands that have been kicked off of Klaviyo. Like it's crazy. Like so there's like kind of eliminating the toxic externality, like, which is an existential risk to those businesses. Like if you're an agency and you're pushing a product that is pumping toxic waste into the client's ad campaigns and Klaviyo campaigns, like WTF, like you're liable for this. I just think now that I've kind of described a methodology for doing that kind of test, I'd like to offer to your listeners, like, we're happy to facilitate, one of these tests. It's totally, like, we can do the work for you, but it's totally reproducible by the customer if they're willing to and know the steps on how to reproduce it. Like, it's just a little bit of configuration work so that you match up the sessions with the guesses. But at the end of the day, like, they can know, because they'll see what their customer records were, and they'll see what the guesses were, and they'll be able to verify that, yeah, this is what the ID provider provided me, and they'll be able to log into their Shopify or Klaviyo to say, yeah, those are the actual customer records, and yes, this is actually the matching rate, and yes, it's 25% or something like this. Like it's going to be horrific. So we're able to provide that capability for free, and it takes a day or two to run the test, and what do you think, Sanjay? This whole thing is a house of cards. Like, I think ours is pretty awesome, like in terms of accuracy, but like everything else is toxic waste.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize how bad most of the data was, and then I think for the first time, like, I found some like bootleg open source like identity resolution stuff, and it was just like just gibberish. It felt like it was like bot emails, honestly, that was coming in, and obviously had again, this is just like my own experience using your tool. It was an immediate, like, okay, positive, like, impact, but it wasn't like 100%. We're not capturing everybody. I think that's reasonable. Your offer about letting our listeners, our viewers We'll make sure that's plugged into the show notes here. And if we send this out of the newsletter, we're going to send it out of the newsletter. So is that valid for people who are already using identity resolution tools, or is it just for anybody? Is that cool for, like, if someone's totally new to this and they're like, I want to test this to make, can I
I mean,
have fun?
most commonly, we do this competitive benchmarking in a competitive situation. If you're using some other existing website visitor identification product, that said, I suppose there's no harm in running a test on just us. Like, I think we're the only vendor who would be willing to do that, because I'm relatively confident of our kind of the range of accuracies that we typically do, and that they're it's like A minus B kind of area versus like F minus kind of ranges. So yeah, we can do either. But typically, I would just say that if you're using one of these other third-party data providers, for website visitor identification, and you have a hunch that this thing is kind of screwing up your deliverability or screwing up your campaigns, like, there should be some urgency to want to, like, get to the bottom of that, because there could be something to, like, usually people have a hunch that there's something
Yeah, it's too good to
wrong.
be true kind of thing, for sure.
And we would love to work with you to try to troubleshoot that and see if that is indeed the case.
Cool. I mean, if you're listening to this and or watching this, go take Larry up on this offer. It's like such a good deal. And I'll stake my own personal reputation on, like, I think this is a good tool. I don't get to my personal reputation matters to me more than anything. And I genuinely do believe in what Larry and his team are building. One of the things I found fascinating when we were talking before we started recording was, like, when you're trying to figure out who someone is, there's like the number of guesses that you're taking, and then how, like, accurate that guess is, and then, like, the number of guesses relative to the total number of possible, like customers, right? So I guess it's like that's the match rate and the accuracy. Can you, like, dig into well, actually, let me ask you a different question. When you were first starting this business, were you at this level of accuracy? Like, did you come out of the gate knowing, hey, there's something weird going on here. I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna work until I get to this, or did you kind of, like, evolve up to this level of accuracy?
Look, when we started this out like 2+ years ago, we had some proprietary tech, but in order to make it scale, we did sort of what other vendors were doing, which was licensing crappy shit data. From there's the genesis of the data being used by these vendors. It's primarily two sources. Um, it could be co-registration networks, and this is like the scummiest. It's like payday loans and all sorts of, like, crappy forms that you fill out, and then you get hit up with a billion offers. Like, it's just so scammy. And then the second source is like DSP, demand side platforms, like ad retargeting platforms. Those are, like, not they're not completely wrong, but the standard of excellence is, like, if they can be like 20% or 30% correct, like, they can kind of exist as a DSP. I think the issue here is that when you try to take that data and use it in email outreach campaigns, then or to inform your Facebook ad targeting algorithms, then you're really playing with fire here, because like, that was not the intended use case for that type of data. And some of these new thresholds of, like, 0.3% spam complaints and stuff like this, like, that's relatively new. Like, it was a 2024 kind of introduction. So I would say, like, about 18 months ago, our team sort of started to just trying to keep up with other vendors. We saw that other vendors were trying to jack up their match rates, and so, like, it's like, oh my god, we were gonna have to add more data sources because that's what everyone else is doing. But then we would see like some pretty crazy results. This is almost 2 years ago, um, and that led us down this path of trying to get to the bottom of like, you know, which of these kind of sources of data is accurate enough to use, and the answer was none of them. Like we must have trialed like 30 of them, and they were all crappy shit. And that's why like all these vendors who do visitor ID are are screwed. Like I don't think those companies should even exist, um, because it's not a matter of just like, oh, we'll turn off this data provider and turn on a different one. Like they're all crappy shit, and so we had to really spend almost 2 years really fundamentally rethinking, like from the ground up, from first principles, like building up our data sources and partners, and trying to really get to the bottom of how to properly identify these people, and do it in a way where it's mostly right as opposed to mostly wrong. And I think we have something really unique here. Um, you know, I'm a electrical engineer by training. This is I would say I'm a stronger, you know, in that field than I am in a marketer position, and like I think this product has what it takes.
Well, first of all, I love the conviction. Two, I also find it incredibly fascinating. I think you're I don't remember who else I was talking to, but you were the second or third person I talked to on this podcast this year that did some sort of like real science and then somehow ended up in digital marketing, which I really love that transition. Um, I think this is a great opportunity for us to kind of switch into another set of questions that I know I've run into whenever I have conversations about this type of product, which is compliance. How is this compliant? How is identifying these visitors using all these data sources, piping it directly into Klaviyo and sending them an email, like dumping them into the welcome series? How is that compliant? Where is it not compliant? I know there's some geographic constraints as well. So I'd love for you to like walk us through just the high level of compliance in this industry.
Sure. There's multiple layers of compliancy. Uh, there's like international and federal laws. Stuff like CAN spam or GDPR. Uh, First of all, we don't recommend using this kind of stuff in Europe. Uh, uh, our compliancy mechanism is that we remove emails and identities from like we don't work with the data partners or uh, anything that's trying to source from those regions. As far as CAN spam is concerned, uh, interestingly, if you read the requirements of CAN spam, it's more about clearly disclosing who is sending the email. It's about having a footer that has your mailing address on it. It's about like having the right to unsubscribe and promising to process those unsubscribes in a timely way. So there's nothing about CAN spam, which is the law of the land for USA, that says you can't do an email outreach. Like that would run afoul of the First Amendment, which says Congress shall pass no law that in any way abridges a right to free speech. So that, given the makeup of the Supreme Court right now, like I feel like that's pretty solid. Additionally, these state privacy laws like CCPA or etc. Those also tend to be much more focused, actually almost entirely focused on kind of the right to have your data deleted rather than not being allowed to outreach to these people in the first place. Okay. So that's kind of compliance in a
So
nutshell.
CCPA is California. Like, so with California, you're saying you can use this, but there are additional protocols that you have to follow, or is California falling into the same bucket as Europe would?
I mean, we've actually done the work here. So there's CCPA kind of compliancy that says like certain customers, like if they ask to be removed from this database, they have to be allowed to be removed. And so we've provided like opt-out capabilities for individuals to opt out of those. So that's, you know, like we've done a lot of that compliancy, you know, for our customers already. There's other layers of compliancy around like Klaviyo. Now, individual email service providers um, have adopted different policies around like, you know, um, who you can email to. Like, does it have to have a double opt-in, or can you, um, can you email people who visited your website? So, Klaviyo actually says that it's not allowed. Okay, like if you read the acceptable use policy, policing that is a different matter. But but it does say that, products, like, it doesn't list us, but it does list out. Well, actually, I'm not sure if it lists anyone by name, but it does say like those types of products they don't recommend using, and that's fine if you're $100 million brand and you've made it, and all you have to do is kick up your feet and kind of count the money flowing in, like, but the reality is of these of D2C, if you're like a 6 or 7 or 8 figure brand, like, you still have to work for a living and chase down every lead. So we do have some capabilities to, completely take that risk off the table. We're the only identity resolution provider that has an email service provider uh, included in the product. So the it's such a racket. It's like these other products, we won't name them, but like these other website visitor products, they're just like shoveling toxic waste into other ESPs. So like this data that's like 70, 80, 90% wrong, they dump that into like a Klaviyo, uh, and then it's like dilution. Like if you have something that's like complete toxic waste, but then you kind of dilute it within a Klaviyo that has like 100,000 emails, it kind of gets a little bit diluted, and that's how they're able to kind of survive. Um, we have a lot of conviction in the quality of our data, and so a while ago we decided we would just make our own ESP, because like we think, well, we're pretty sure that you'll have a high engagement and low spam complaints, and we stand by our data. So we created like sort of an ESP. I wouldn't say it's to replace Klaviyo or anything like this, but what we can do is we can do the follow up for the third party kind of visitor identification emails that are provided, and then based on the engagement, like if they actually purchase something, well, then we didn't copy that record into Klaviyo. What happened was we were just doing the emailing for you, and that person then became a customer. So that they went from like a third party visitor identification data to a first party customer. So we have different options like that that are fully compliant, and it's really just more about your risk profile. Like, so we have the brands that haven't quite made it yet and are willing to kind of you know take a risk on something, because there's also a risk of going out of business. But others are sticklers for compliancy, and we fully respect that, and that's why we provide our own email service provider, and we warrant the accuracy of our emails, and we're happy to email them for you, and like without like threat of execution, if you will. Any questions, thoughts, or questions on that?
No, that makes a ton of sense. And this again, uh, one of the reasons why I was really keen on doing this episode with you is I'm really bullish on the space as a whole, and obviously, like, you've kind of this conversation, previous conversations we've had, you've kind of opened my eyes to just how much, I guess, like, kind of rampant fraud is in this space, and it's been really refreshing to like
It's such a
actually think,
joke. It's such a
yeah,
joke.
it's
Like
insane actually.
when you look at it, oh my God! Like, how do these companies scale to this many customers? I mean, it's such a joke.
But I think there's like so much. I don't know, to use the term of the day, misinformation. So much misinformation about like what is good, and they're like a lot of it has been like, oh, it's incremental stuff. No one's talking about the deliverability. No one's talking about shoveling toxic waste into your ad account or your Klaviyo, and like the effects that's happening on it. I think if anything, this is kind of like a real whistleblower moment. One of the reasons why I want to have this conversation. And another thing, I do believe in this type of like tool when done well. Like your product is a great example of this. I've lived through it. I've seen it be beneficial in a way that I was skeptical of like the degree with which it would be successful, and I was blown away. So I think more and more brands should adopt this. Fun fact: if you're using Replo or if you're on Shopify, it works out of the box, and I know this because I set it up myself. I think one of the first conversations that I had with Larry, he said, "Thanks for like using it on the Shark Tank brand." And I had said, "Oh yeah, by the way, like I did the setup." He's like, "Wait, no, it was you?" I was like, "Yes, it was me. I actually did it myself." So if I can do it, you can do it too. Larry, we're coming up on time. If there's one thing that you could leave the people with, and obviously we're going to link to like the your special offer in the show notes in our newsletter. If there's one kind of tactical piece of advice you could leave people with if they're completely new to this type of tool in their arsenal, what would that piece of advice be?
The promise of visitor identification is incredible. Like what we're pitching here, uh, that we can ID a significant percentage of website visitors at a high, like mostly correct accuracy rate is incredible. The reality up until now has been horrific. It's what you said, like a whistleblower moment. Like it's like a cabal. Like there's like all these like competing vendors, and there's like the elephant in the room is like the data's all wrong, but no one's
Yeah.
willing to talk about that. And well, until now, because we believe we've convincingly cracked this nut by like doing a complete rebuild of the whole funnel. Yeah, but like this is the elephant in the room, or the like this is the reality is that all these places get their toxic waste from the same vendors, and they have no idea on how to fix it
Mhm.
because they're not the ones who are originating that data. Like it's they're just licensing crappy shit data from crappy shit vendors, and if they knew how to do this, they would have done it by now. Is kind of my point. And so, if you've been burned by, if you've used one of these things in the past and it torched your deliverability, and that's certainly happened. Like the churn is extremely high for these products because of that reason. I would just respectfully suggest that we give it another go. You don't even have to act on the data. We can just do a test and then just line up the correct and the wrong things to give you the conviction that this actually is working. And if you then have that trust in the data, then I think it unlocks. It's a significant unlock. We've got brands that are killing it, and this is such an incredible. Like I feel like this is the lowest hanging fruit in marketing. Like a next gen ID resolution capabilities to significantly augment paid and email retargeting efforts.
I love it. Well, Larry, I sincerely hope that this is the moment where you get the multiple that you really wanted, and I can tell you really care about the work that you're doing. I think that's the thing that's shown throughout this episode, and obviously all the time that we talk offline. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I hope if you're watching at home that you learned something. Go run a test with this man, please, for the love of God, go run a test with this man. And with that, thank you for watching. Thanks for being on the show, Larry.